Okay, hello again. I'm finally back with the top 100 challenge. It was delayed for a while because I was having some hard time recording and then my computer was cutting off mid-recording like it was freezing. Um, I think it was because the antivirus expired, so I had to get that renewed and updated. I had a whole bunch of updates on the computer, did a bunch of cleaning, a bunch of scanning, but it's running much more smoothly than it was before, so I'm pretty confident that I should be able to record more videos without it cutting off in the middle. So I can get back to recording some of these. So what happened was I eventually lost a third game, which I was intending to make episode 3, but then instead, we'll say I think my emotions definitely played a role in this because I started getting a little bit frustrated and wanting revenge, and this is kind of risky when you're doing something like chess because when you get frustrated by repeated losses despite your hard work, then what happens is that it carries over into your games, it influences how you play, and then this is how you go on the downward spiral, and this is so it's very risky to continue playing when you're in that kind of mind state. Um, so I did play on anyway, and then luckily, for the most part, I started getting a whole bunch of wins. I think there was like one more loss, but I like won that game, I won that game, I won that game, I won that game. Okay, and then I won this game. So I was lucky that it didn't backfire on me and didn't turn into a downward spiral because it's kind of double edged. It's risky to play chess like that, but I did it anyway, and in this case, it worked. Um, and aside from chess, I was also practicing some games of Go against the computer. It's another very interesting strategy game. You can play Go online if you want to. Um, I'm still basically a beginner. I don't know. I don't understand all the basic invasions that you do, like in your opponent's corner. There's they're like called Suzekis, I think they're called. But depending on the situation, you want to invade in different ways. But then I haven't worked all that out yet, so that's a bit of the theory behind it. So I have an idea of what the theory of Go looks like. I played some games against a strong computer, so I definitely learned a lot. It's a fun game. Um, but now I think I can finally get back to my most recent game on this, and then maybe after this video we'll look at some of my best victories. Like maybe we'll start with a miniature, maybe we'll do, or maybe not necessarily my best victories, but my best games and my most memorable games. But in this game, I was playing with white. We have 2182, 2135, so we're around the same strength, though, a little bit higher for Troth. Um, so d4, f5, I played with white. I don't think I'm really all that scared of the Dutch defense. Um, let me see. Maybe the Stonewall defense is a little bit more solid. It's hard to crack. But for the most part, with these G6, Knight f6 variations, which is what people typically play, there's a lot of ways that white can, well, actually not a lot of ways, but just a simple way is G3. It's just a very simple way to counter a lot of these setups that black throws at you. So G6, Bishop G2, Knight f6, C4, Bishop G7. So white defends his king side. I control these two center squares, and I put pressure on this pawn, making it hard to develop this bishop. That's a very key point, and it does show itself in this game. If you can prevent this bishop from getting active, it often gives white a very powerful and even winning position. So castles, knight f3, knight h3, I didn't notice that. Apparently knight h3 is possible there. So d6, I castled, knight c6. Normally my opponent plays something like queen e8 or c6. I think these are definitely the two top moves. So let's say queen e8, for example, then I would answer d5. It's because he's threatening e5 and then takes, and he has that pawn duo in the center. So something like that. D5 threatens en passant and therefore prevents that idea. And then the theory continues with something like knight a6, for instance, and then you can play rook b1, you can play knight d4. So queen e8 certainly better. There's also c6, it's the Warsaw variation. D5 is good, E5, and then you can take en passant again. There's multiple approaches to all that, but knight c6, I think this is kind of dubious, and the computer agrees. I think black just has a more solid way of continuing with c6 or queen e8, because d5, knight e5, knight takes e5. Alternatives, queen b3 apparently, d takes, okay. So here, black has these doubled pawns, but he also has a good pawn presence in the center. He has e5 and f5. So they control all of these squares. And when I see this, my gut reaction is to challenge these two pawns in the middle immediately by playing e4. So I'm just trying to challenge black's control over the middle as soon as possible. The computer says this is okay, but it says queen b3 is a little bit better. And then if you look at the statistics as well, you see like a 47% win rate, and here you have a 35% win rate, and then the black's percent is 36, and then 23 here. So there's a pretty significant jump in that in that winning rate, and the computer agrees that queen b3 is apparently better. So the idea is that you're lining up against this king. An example line would be something like h6, c5. He's going to play king h8, and then you play rook d1. So black has e5 and f5, so it's possible to just challenge it immediately with something like e4, but you can also create your own strong presence like c5 and d5, and this is even stronger because they control even more advanced squares. And then if black plays something like g5, for example, bishop d2, and then probably rook a c1. I think it was something like 6. No. Okay. That's what I was thinking. So it's on there still. You can still play e4 in the future later. You don't have to play it immediately. So the computer wasn't pointing that out. But it's that you don't have to push e4 immediately. You can play it later even. But it's still not even the best one at the moment either. It's still saying better moves are like bishop d2 or something, or bishop e3. So that whole line with queen b3 isn't something that I would normally consider. I typically just play e4 immediately when I see these pawns and I want to challenge them. So f4, g takes f4, pretty logical. E takes f4. Here I just answered e5. The computer says bishop f4 is apparently more accurate. And I wasn't sure I liked this because why would I just allow this tactic with knight takes e4, bishop g3, knight takes g3. I just wasn't sure why I should allow all this and then just play e6 and undermine these two pawns. So I didn't really understand that because, well, I'm allowing black to kind of undermine this and give him some tactics, like trading that doubled pawn and trading like trading one pawn for that center pawn. So possible, but I just wasn't really sure about all of that. I just played e5. It looks like the more aggressive and more critical test. And it's because you're threatening this e6 move, and this is just a very devastating idea because this bishop and this rook are going to be locked out of the game forever, and this is why I think e5 is really critical here. Because first of all, you're attacking this knight, so it has to go away. So in the game, he played knight h5, but if you play something like knight g4, then there's the idea e6. And black often gets into a lot of trouble in these kinds of lines because with his whole entire queen side just cut off from the game because of these two little pawns here, this gives white the grounds for all kinds of devastating attacks against the black king. So when people play the Dutch defense, they're looking to make an attack on the king side. They want to expand on this wing, like play f5, e5, maybe g5, try to attack the white king. But if white gets a setup like this, like that can really kill black's counterplay, and it gives white a very promising position. So in the game he played knight h5, which is even worse than knight g4, e6, a6. So it looks like his idea is he's going to be playing b5, and he wants to try to attack this pawn, maybe get the bishop out this way. But I wasn't really scared of this idea. There's even possibilities like if he plays b5, I might even be able to push d6, attack him this way, and then attack him that way. So there's some tactical problems with it, and I don't even have to react to it. I might even just actually, he doesn't even have time to play b5. In the game, he didn't even have time to play b5 at all. I just played bishop f3, attack his knight immediately. And here's where you start to see the problem, because with his queen side cut off from the game, I'm already starting to form some threats on the king side, and his pieces can't get there in time to defend. For example, this knight is hanging, so he had to play something like bishop takes c3. If black has to play moves like this, then it's a sign like something is going wrong for black already, because yeah, I have doubled pawns, but at the same time, he gave up his key defender. Like, that dark squared bishop defends a lot of squares over this side of the board. I now have an unopposed dark squared bishop that could control those squares. I can use that in conjunction with the queen, who also can control those squares, and you see how deadly this is getting. There's a remaining defender in this knight, and I can take it out. Like, this is very dangerous for black. And on top of that, although these pawns are doubled, it's not even that bad, because he can't seriously attack these things. And also I have an open b file if I even need it, because this is just an extra boost I have to the position. So you see that white is completely dominating, and it started with getting these two pawns all the way up here. Like, if you maintain this, like, white basically has a winning position probably, or very close to it. I'll delete some of the arrows though. So he played knight g7, queen d4. White has a very aggressive position. Queen d4, it's attacking this pawn. I have a centralized queen, and he can't really challenge it with these kind of tactics, because although these pawns are doubled, this is a good doubled pawn, because this pawn defends this queen, this pawn defends this pawn. So the doubled pawns serve a valid function, so they're not even a real weakness. So g5, king h1. So king h1 here, I was thinking, in the game I was considering the move h4. The idea is that I'm trying to undermine this pawn so that I can get this bishop in the game, and then maybe get in bishop e5 or bishop h6. I thought it was okay, but the reason I decided on king h1 is because, first of all, on principle, I want to get as many pieces in the game as possible, and this rook is pretty passive, this rook is pretty passive. So by playing king h1, I open up roads to get in. So for example, rook g1, and then in the future I can bring this rook over as well. You'll see in a minute. The reason I decided on this was more concretely, it's that if my opponent plays h5, which he did in the game, I answer rook g1, and then g4 is impossible. So I played this bishop g4 sacrifice. A lot of people might hesitate to play these kinds of moves because they don't want to give up the bishop. It seems kind of risky, but again, if you look at these two pawns right here, these pieces are out of the game. It's basically like black is down a rook and a bishop if I can get these pieces in the game. So that's the first sign that this is a strong positional sacrifice. Secondly, look at the open g file I get in exchange for this. Like, if this rook gets here, this pawn is going to fall because it's hit by the queen, the rook, and the bishop. Therefore, this rook is going to get in the game. And all of this is going to be piling up on the king in so many different directions. So I knew that g4 advance was impossible, and when I saw that concretely black can't push those pawns forward, that's what allowed me to decide to make this kind of decision with king h1, rook g1, knowing that these pawns advances were impossible. Rook g4, rook f6, bishop f4, queen f8, and then by this point there's multiple winning moves for white because you see basically all the white pieces are going to be attacking this black king, and these pieces are still out of the game. So you can play bishop e5, you can play rook ag1, which I did in the game, king h8. Multiple winning moves here. I played bishop e5. The computer pointed out like this was my only inaccuracy right here in this game. A better move is rook h4 check, king h8, and then the key move was queen e4. That's what I didn't notice. The point is that this knight is pinned, so you can never get in the way, and you're threatening queen h7 checkmate. So the computer found an immediate way to go for checkmate. I found the slower way to go for checkmate is like just piling up on this diagonal, attacking everything. c5. And from here it's just some basic calculation. Of course you don't want to take this pawn because that's going to allow him to get this bishop in the game and then swing the rook in. The point is you want to keep these two pieces as passive as possible, and that's what gives white a very promising position. So here we have some simple calculation. Bishop takes f6, e takes f6, and queen f4, and he resigned. It's because queen h6 check is coming, the rook's going to crash through, the king is basically dead. So what I calculated is if he takes the queen, I take with check, takes, and then it doesn't matter what black does here. It's just going to be game over because let's say he pushes the pawn. I'm just going to play rook here, and there's nowhere that the king can go. It's just oh sorry. This rook cuts the g file. This rook cuts the h file. So the Dutch defense, I'm usually not all that scared of the Dutch defense. This is one of the reasons I like having, if I can, in many of my games, I like to have a strong pawn either on e5 or e6. It commonly becomes a strong point for attack. It's because the e5 pawn, it keeps the knight away from f6, which is commonly a good defensive square. And in this case, e6, if it cuts off a bishop from the game, that's awesome. Anything that cuts your opponent's pieces off, especially these advanced pawns on like e5, d5, e6, d6 sometimes, but usually the first two, then that's what often gives me a very strong attack. We do have another game in which I did that. It was a very short game. I guess we'll do that in the next video, but I hope you found this video just a little bit instructive. Sorry I had some recording issues for a while, but I finally did get my antivirus upgraded and my computer is much more smooth than it used to be. So I should be able to record a few more videos, show you some of my best games. And I hope you enjoyed this video, so thank you.